Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
Hello, and welcome to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. So today, I'm happy to introduce you to Jeffrey Geurink, and I'll get to him in a minute. But if you're listening on the podcast, just know this episode is also on the Blue Collar Leadership YouTube channel under the Real People Getting Real Results playlist. So if you want to go watch us talk and see how ugly I am and how awesome Jeffrey is, you can do that. Otherwise, just listen to the podcast, and I appreciate you listening or watching. So, Jeffrey, it's awesome to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
And where are you at for the folks listening? Where are you at in the country?
Right smack dab in the middle. I'm in the Quad Cities of Iowa, Davenport.
Okay. Up there, whenever I think of Iowa, I think of roads that you don't need steering wheels on your cars.
We're right on the Mississippi, right on the. I don't know how the little shape of Iowa where it like bumps out or whatever, right on the little bump out.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So you guys are pretty chilly up there right now, or getting ready for another blast.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's cool. So I'm glad to have you on the show. One thing I always ask people before we really get diving in too deep, but also this usually leads us into the why we're here kind of thing. But how do you and I know each other? I always want people to know that we know each other directly or indirectly some kind of way. I don't just have random people on my show.
Yeah, of course. I'd say maybe about 10 years ago, somewhere in that range, I was working at an aluminum melt shop. And when I was there, I had a job that it was a lot of downtime where you could sit and read books. And I'm normally not one to read, but I ended up just like picking up books, just like to occupy my time. And I just being in the blue collar workforce, I just kind of looked up like blue collar leadership, and just so happens that came in line, with exactly what you were doing. And I just seen opportunity like with the company, because it seemed like it was like leadership by fear. It was just things weren't going the greatest, and I just something in me sparked saying, hey, like, is there something I can do here? How do we get these men to like come together and like work together? And ended up getting the books and reading them. And I think one of the books might have had like, I don't know if it had your phone number or something in it. And somehow I just like called you up, or I don't know if I got a hold of you on Instagram, and ended up having a conversation with you the one day. And I was just ended up talking to you. I was standing out in the backyard. I remember talking to you for about an hour the one day.
Yeah, we had a good little chat. I have a lot of people who are actually on the podcast. That's when I say, how do you know me? That's usually what they lead off with. Somehow or another, they found out about me and called me, and then we talked for, sometimes it's a lot of hours. Usually it's an hour or two. That means you were interested. I don't talk to people who ain't interested. But what was cool though is, like you said, that was about 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it was 3-4 months ago. I can't remember now. You reached out just out of the blue. You sent me a text, I believe, or an email. I can't remember, a text or email. Somehow you messaged me and told me that you had read my stuff and you were thanking me for playing a small role. And by the way, I don't get any credit for your transformation, but I'm glad that something I shared in those books or our conversation played a small piece, in your journey. And that's what you were telling me about. And you were telling me you had written a book. And for the folks who are watching, they can see it. I'm holding it up. If you're on the podcast, you can't see it, but the title is Beyond Broken, and got a pretty cool cover. Half the covers got Jeffrey behind a piece of broken glass, and the other half, and he's smiling, looking sharp like he is today. And the subtitle is How I Overcame Addiction and Pieced My Life Back Together. And so you told me about your book, and anybody I talk to that is going to give me any kind of little bit of credit for helping them transform their life to tell me they wrote a book, guess what I'm going to do, Jeffrey? I'm going to order the book and I'm going to read it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And so I did that. And then, you reached out not just a few days ago and wanted to send me a book. You didn't know I had actually got the book and read it. And, I was getting ready to reach out to you sometime soon. So just, it all worked out. Got you on here real quick, and we're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I appreciate, you reaching out when you did, and hopefully you did get some value out of those books, at work. But you told me a minute ago, and I don't know if that's the book maybe that impacted you, but you said one of the books of mine that you got was 10 foundational, I can't even remember the name of my own book.
Yeah.
10 foundational elements of intentional transformation. We got like 35 books. I can't keep up with all these books.
Dang, that's a lot of books.
But it's about my personal transformation. So you had read, that's one of the ones you read before you even really got serious. So just start off wherever you want to start with your story. But I'm telling you, folks, I'm very proud of you, Jeffrey. I just want to say that right here off the bat. I am tremendously proud of you. That's why we on this call, because I hope something you share, you're helping me just by sharing your story, because somebody may hear it and you help them, which I know you want to help some people. So I'm proud of you. What you did was not easy, and it's just awesome. So thank you for coming on. Where you want to start?
I was going to say, kind of back to where we talked that day. It was kind of, I guess, where you could say the downfall kind of started to happen. It's just, I had accepted Christ into my life probably in my early 20s, and then I got married, got into the factory position. I told myself I'd never work factories again, but it's like when I was working construction, the pay wasn't consistent. You get into the winter, you get the short hours and stuff, and it was just kind of hard for, to run budgets and stuff like that. So I ended up getting back into the factory, and, a little bit older or whatever, like getting in. I was kind of in that, like that in between, I wasn't the young guy in the factory, but I wasn't, like the senior guys. And the factory I went into, actually, it just came out of like a strike, and there was a lot of turmoil between the workers and the staff. And I just got in there, started reading the books, but like I said, it was kind of like in that downfall when I talked to you. It was just all the blessings that came into my life. I was like the marriage. I ended up starting a nonprofit. I got on the volunteer fire department there in my community. Had my kids in traveling sports. I didn't really see them a whole lot, and then I got them into my life 50-50. So all those things were just kind of going on, and it seemed like everything I touched kind of turned to gold, And the one thing I learned the hard way is when you don't give thanks to God for any of that stuff, it's very easy to exalt yourself and find out that humbling is not the greatest experience that you go through. But when I reached out to you, I was just about going into that divorce stage of my life or whatever. And when I was at the factory, like I said, I had a lot of time to read or whatever. And something in me just sparked, I wanted to do better. And I seen it's kind of like with the book Beyond Broken. I seen all this brokenness in this factory. And it's like, man, there's got to be a way to piece this thing back together. And, that was, to me, it's like, how do they do this blue collar? How do you do this for the blue collar people, And then that's where I kind of got into your books and read the first one. I'm like, man, that was good. I read the second one, and it's just trying to bring the workers and the management together. And it just so happened, I ended up getting out of the factory, kind of went the wrong way when I was in there, and my addiction kind of took off. It was kind of like I was in a fight or flight stance, but I just got to a point I was still leading people. People always came to me, they knew that I was a person that could get stuff done, and I knew I knew how to connect the dots in the actual factory. I knew if I needed this part, I would go to this person. And sometimes management didn't like that, because they'd be like, well, how are you getting all this stuff done? I said, well, I'm not going to you guys to get it done. I'm going, it's like my toilet ain't working. I'm going to the plumber. I ain't going to management to put in I said, I wasn't very patient when it came to that stuff. Like I said, if I had something and I needed it fixed, which to me made sense, because I wanted the company to be efficient, make money. So it's if I had to put in a work note to do this, to do that, and it was going to take 2 weeks to do it, I'd rather just go straight to the person and say, hey, can you come take a look at this? Have them fix it on the spot, and then just keep going. But like I said, there was some times that, in doing that, management got a bad taste or whatever. And towards the end there, like I said, it was just kind of one of them deals that were, I was helping out. I became a union steward and was helping out workers, like when they would get in jams and stuff like that. But then like I was just kind of on like you could call like an all out, like kind of like takedown management, it kind of like flipped, I was trying to like serve them the steak dinner on a platter. And then it was like, all right, you want to mess with me, and kind of went back at them. But, and the humbling aspect in that was kind of go different ways here with like the recovery. Yeah. So like when I went to rehab, like when I first got back, there was, I think I always had kind of like a target on my back with them. Just, it's like I was one of them workers that I was extremely efficient, but I went against them. So it was like, how do we get this guy out of here? But we kind of need him, but we kind of don't want him here, So when I went to rehab and I came back, I ended up, like great way to start your sobriety journey is coming back and getting fired from your job, So it's like I went in, I'm like, I'm not going to wrestle no feathers. I'm just going to sit back, play her easy. I said, I got a newfound take on life, and they brought me in and fired me. I'm like,
right off the bat.
Yeah, I said, this isn't like the greatest way to start this. And that was where I got back into construction. And I had done construction before I got in the factory. I was doing the post frame construction, building like agricultural buildings, shops, garages. And we ended up, when I got fired or whatever, I ended up kind of like a transitional period, which it was okay for like in the fact of like coming back, like when I came back from the rehab that I'd self-admitted into at that time, like I got into the AA program, and it gave me time to really work on myself. Like instead of having the job and the busy and trying to fit in, like building my foundation in the last hour of the day when I was tired, it actually gave me that time to just kind of work part-time here and there and really get into the program. I did like the 90 and 90 days that they like ask about, or, like you'll inquire about like when you're in there, and they try to like really get you in there and get you in the meetings, working like the 12 steps of the program and just like really revamping your life. And I ended up reaching out to my old guy that I worked for in construction. I knew he was sober, and I just kind of reached out and said, hey man, I got sober. He's like, oh, that's awesome. And about the time I started, he was going on like 30 years sobriety. So it was kind of cool, like coming back into it and having kind of like a mentor in business that was sober as well. So we kind of hit it off right off the bat. And
what year was that, Jeffrey, when you came out of rehab and turned yourself around? For the listeners, I read your book, but I'm trying to make sure you fill them in on some of the gaps that folks hadn't read your book.
Yeah, it was 2020. So July 8th of 2020 was when I self-admitted into rehab. So then, I'll be going 5.5, 6 years this July.
Yeah, and you hadn't slipped back.
Yeah, so
that's awesome. Good stuff.
And that was, there's a lot to that. I got tied into AA, but then I also got tied into a local church. And remember our one praise leader, he'll preach at times, and like when he was preaching, he said, it was like building an altar, and it was one of those things that like when I got in there, it was like I didn't want to be driving the car anymore. I said it was one of those deals. I had a story. I think I touched base in the book about it. I said, it's kind of like I kept Jesus in the fix-a-flat bag. You'd be driving down the highway, and life be going wrong. Well, then you had to take all the stuff. You had to throw out the coats, throw out the blankets, the spare. Throw all this stuff out. Throw Jesus out on the ground, and it's like, all right, fix it. And then all of a sudden it was, all right, I'm going to stuff him back in there and stuff all that stuff back in there. My problem's fixed. I'll just carry on down the road. And I learned that wasn't quite the way to do it. I said, now he drives the car and I ride shotgun. I just say, where are we going today? And, I have a lot of people ask me like, well, when you start going with God, like, how do you, like, what do you mean? How do you do it? I said, I don't know. I just wake up and make contact with him. I said, wherever we go, I'll take you with me today, And I said, it can be, I said, it might be the grocery store. It might be the gas pump. I said, you never know when you're going to meet somebody that when you're talking to them, just sharing your story, and that's why I said doing stuff like this, you can go more in depth on it, but, having that 2-minute testimony, 15-minute testimony, and then, at the hour, sometimes when I get into it, it's kind of like, hey, we got to shut you up. Yeah, kid, you can talk, so
there's a lot to it, right? A lot of different aspects,
definitely.
A lot of different points.
Oh, definitely.
And so do you share what you're addicted to? Is that something you share publicly? You don't have to.
I struggled with alcohol, which, like growing up Midwest, it was just one of those things, which I think, it's kind of all over the world, not even just here in the US, but I mean, you look at sports, any aspect of life, it's like alcohol's all over it. It's like to have a good time, you got to have that. And, at a young age, that's what I gripped to. It was the fact that it numbed. And when I would go out in public, I always had like real high anxiety. So like in doing that, it would numb the anxiety. Well, then I realized it numbed the back pain. I realized it numbed this, it numbed heartache, it numbed everything, and when I gripped to that numbing aspect of it, like they'll tell you in like AA, like, alcohol isn't the problem; it's the solution to all the problems. But once it becomes the problem, then you don't have control over it whatsoever, because like the dependency it created. I tried many times, just like, okay, well, I'll give up drinking this weekend. I won't do it anymore, and get the shakes, just getting whatever. And then of course, you have phones, so you get on Google and you kind of be your own doctor and like, oh, well, what if I have a seizure? Like it was just like that fear of staying in it, that my kids might find me, and
oh yeah,
come in the house and I'd be laying there dead or something, so it's like almost like that would lead me to drinking more. And, I talk about it in the book, it's like my truck was on autopilot, like I'd tell myself, I ain't gonna drink tonight. And I was like, I was like, I guess we're drinking tonight. It's just like,
man. And you didn't drink just a little bit either. You wasn't just playing around with it.
No, as I said at the end there, I was, it was close to probably 50 beers a day or something that I was drinking. That's why I said I was kind of missing out of this world.
You didn't say 15, did you?
No, 50.
50. I know
50. Yeah. That's why I said, by God's grace, I'm still here and able to, talk and be a help to others and bring hope in those times. Because it's like I said, like with the title of the book, Beyond Broken, it's, I didn't know, like the decisions and everything I had made in my life, I'd pushed everyone away. Business, my finances were messed up. My relationship with my kids and my family were messed up, and it was just like, I wasn't just, physically sick with the addiction. I was mentally sick. I was spiritually sick, was one of the biggest things, and
yeah,
that's where I said, and I accepted Christ, but then walked away from it. One of the things, like one of the humbling things I learned was like, I never got to know him. It was, I never had that personal relationship. It was just kind of,
yeah,
all the blessings. That's what I said, when all those blessings come in and you take credit for it yourself, that doesn't end well,
Yeah, like I said, man, I'm proud of you, because that's a lot of alcohol. You wasn't just like having a little bit or binge drinking like I did. I would go 6 months sometimes without a drink, but when football season come in Auburn, Alabama, if I wasn't deer hunting and stuff, I was the binge drinker. I might drink from Friday evening to Sunday evening, time to get ready to go back to work the next week. I'd be drunk all weekend. But for me, I hadn't had a drink now since 2012, which you read about my journey in the book. But it was neat to, I want you to share a little bit about the book, because, I didn't know what to expect when I ordered the book. But, what it is, the way I describe it, and you describe it how it ought to be described, but it's almost like a journal of when you got ready to go to rehab. That's like when the book starts, is like when you're getting ready to go, and then it ends basically when you're done. So it's almost like a journey. I forget, was it 6 weeks or 2 months? I can't remember how many days or weeks it was. 70 something days or
50.
50. Yeah. So basically, it's almost, you must have been, either you could remember. I remember you started in the book for a while. You wasn't writing it down. Then you went back and started writing it down, and then you kept writing it down. So tell me about. Just tell me about whatever you want to talk about the book. So anybody listening, because drinking 50 beers a day and then deciding to quit, and how you went about it, you just started your own path. One thing I'd say, Jeffrey, for anybody listening though, is anybody, any moment can press that reset button.
Oh,
That's the good
definitely.
thing about choices. We come fully loaded with an endless supply. If we're still alive, we still got another choice to make. So share about the book, about, what the book is from your frame
Yeah.
of reference.
So towards the end, that's where I was just drinking real heavy. Like I said, I kind of knew I was on. It was kind of like I didn't want to wake up to see the next day, but I wasn't. I didn't really want to die. It's like I knew I had my kids and stuff, but I didn't know how to stop it. And in that sense, like I actually reached out to my ex-wife, which it explains in the book. I reached out to my ex-wife. I hadn't probably talked to her five years or something. I just said, "Hey, I'm killing myself." I said, and most nights I said I would hit my knees in the shower. I said, I wouldn't be in any shape, but I just, God make me a better father, a better man. Just take this away. I don't know what to do, and it's kind of like where they said, like God takes those moments, takes those tests and turns them into a testimony. So it was like you wonder where God's at in that moment, but it's like I was running from God. And I tell people that a lot. I said, you're not going to see God in those moments of your life when you're running from him. It is until you take those running shoes off. And I said, they're metaphorical running shoes, I said, but you have to take them off and hang them up yourself and say, hey, I'm done running. I said, this,
we got to
that's
do our
it.
part, don't we?
Yeah. And it was crazy because I reached out to the ex-wife and she made a call. Next thing you know, I was talking to some admission people and they wanted me to go Monday. And I'm like, nah, I was like, that's too quick. I said, I got to tell my kids what I'm doing, this, and this. Well, you want to do this. I said, okay, yeah. So they did Wednesday and,
but it wasn't down the street. It wasn't down the street either, what they're talking about.
Oh, no. That's where I said it. They ended up shipping me to California. And that's where some people said, like, why didn't you just like go to the Abbey Center, which is a place here in the Quad Cities? I said, I didn't want to be a place because they can't hold you against your will. So I said, if you get to a point where like, things aren't going your way, that you're just like, screw it, I'll go home. Like
it would have been too easy.
Yeah, and I was just like, I wanted to be gone. And then of course, like how the book starts out, it's just, I told myself, like I locked the door on the apartment and I thought I was going to this like big mansion that had like these blue windows and stuff. I'm like, man, this is cool. And showed the kids. I said, yeah, my work. I said, even though I don't like them, I said, the job sucks. So it's just kind of like, this insurance is great. It's going to send me to this place that I said, and they're like, oh man, yeah, that's really cool. And it's just like, I later come to find out I didn't need the vacation. I needed the actual realness of the place I went, and I remember just like locking my door and my kids were already down in the car. My ex-wife came to pick me up and I just said, I was just like, I said, Lord, there's no turning back. I said, I won't come back. I said, come back the way I was. I'm going to come back better. I said that this will never be, this version of me doesn't exist anymore, and it was crazy because I was like the no turning back that kept on like going through the story where I kind of like
that's your theme.
Yeah. And I was like, I get to California and or I was in Dallas or no, I was in California where I went to pick up my bags and like you walk down this hallway and there's this like huge sign that says no turning back and there was a door. So it's just like once you went through it, you couldn't come back. And I'm like, well, that's kind of crazy that I said no turning back. And then there's this like huge sign, but
one of those coincidences. Les Brown says coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous.
Yeah, definitely. And I got there and there was no house with the blue windows. And I thought,
it wasn't the same place you were expecting, right?
I said, I still had my phone on me. So when they brought me in, they took my phone, my wall, all that stuff. It's kind of like what they say, you're turning your life over to complete strangers. You hand them the key to your life. And I ended up, I text the ex-wife. I said, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And I'm like in the ghetto of East Hollywood. And like, that was when I asked the dude, I said, hey, where's the water? He's just kind of looked at me and kind of smiled and looked the other way. I'm like, okay, they got my information. They know who I am. But I was like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be, and they kept on telling me like, what's it matter? You're here, you're sober. What's it matter? I said, this is an honesty program and you guys lied to me. Well, what happens in like the recovery aspect is because I didn't go Monday that with the fentanyl and like the meth and just different drugs like that, those are like serious to get them out there that day, get
That
them a
other
room,
people are on.
yeah.
You were not on that, but other people were. So they
Yeah.
took your slot that you didn't take. So then you had to go to a different place.
Yeah. So like I said, when that shifts you over, and that's just like when I got there, I said, okay, that makes sense. Like I said, there was an old guy that was there. He's like, sometimes God puts you where you need to be, not where you want to be. And I'm just like, all right. Yeah. And, I ended up staying where I was at, started talking with the people and just like the realness of it, and just kind of decided that that's where I was supposed to be. And, the first 7 days, they don't give you any contact with the outside world. And the first phase is like 21 days. And that's like, I think it's 21 to 30 days or something that for phase one. So I was there, like the first couple of days were just like strenuous. But then like, as I was sitting there, I heard, write this down. I'm like, where's that coming from? Write this down. I'm like, write what? I'm like, write what? Write this down. And one day I'm like, all right. I was just like, I'm sitting at a table. I'm like, all right, I'll write it down. I don't know what I'm writing. So that was where the actual, like the journal part of the book came. So I just went into my room with a clear head. I like so clearly remembered like the anxiety, like just the rage I was in that day of. So I just started writing there, and then I just slowly caught up because I couldn't do anything those first 7 days. So it literally gave me time to just kind of reflect back on that.
Yeah.
And then it just became a day-to-day journal. And it was kind of like my way of like reflecting back. So on the end of the day, that was like normally a time where I would be drinking or whatever, but like it took my mind to a different spot. So like when I was doing that, it would be, whatever we did for that day, I would just jot little notes down. And then I would spend like the last hour and a half of each day just journalizing, what happened that day.
And that's kind of how the book's laid out, right? The book's laid out basically day 1 through 50, like you said. And
yeah,
there's a little bit, it opens up with a little and then it wraps up there at the end. But basically it's like your 50-day, whatever you wanted to write about each day. I know you talked about some of the one person who could cook real good.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I still talk to JoJo too. He's actually down in Puerto Rico. I always told him if he started a restaurant, I said I'll be your cook. I said you tell me where I gotta go.
We were in Puerto Rico last week.
Yeah, he's actually down in Puerto Rico right now. That's where we went down on vacation for the honeymoon. Just like a couple of weeks ago, we were down on the Virgin Islands, and I was like flying over. I'm like, man, so I have to reach out to him, but like, I'll have different things that we like had at Rehab. I'll be like, hey man, how'd you make that homemade ranch you made or whatever? And yeah, like we still talk to this day. So it's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. And he was, he was teaching you how to cook too. You started learning, right?
Yeah. Like it was kind of cool. Like I always liked to cook, but like he had that like 5-star aspect. So like there was times, like in that about burnt the house down the one day, but where you get the pan and you do like the flip it and then like flips in the back of the pan. Well, on a gas stove, and I had too much oil on the pan. I went like this, and I didn't pull back fast enough. All the oil flipped. Had flames going everywhere. But yeah, that was one of the days, like in Rehab on Thursdays. It was called Cooking with JoJo, and it was just like he brought us all in, and like each person would get different aspects of the kitchen, and that was just kind of like a little breakdown that we had a class, and just brought us in to show us different cooking skills and stuff like that. And yeah, it was pretty cool.
So what was it about? And I don't want to stop you if you got more that you want to keep going on the path you were on. But what was it once you got there? Because you didn't have to stay. But for the audience members, can you just describe a little bit about? Because I know it wasn't a lot of people in the group you were in reading about. It wasn't that many people really, and they were different people. Some of they'd come and go. I know you, as I read the book, you were there, and people's coming and people's going, and sometimes they ain't too happy when they get there, and then they leave because they can, I guess, like you said, and then they just disappear. And then also there's the different stages or phases, you call it, where you move and then you got to leave some folks behind. Now you're in a kind of like graduating up to the next level and you go join a new group. Can you just share a little bit about the size and what was it that kept you in there? Because, I mean, it helped you tremendously. It worked, right? It did what it was supposed to do, but you had to do the work too.
Yeah, a lot of it, like I said, I had a support system, which between my mom and this, I like I said, like credit to my ex-wife at that time that just, making sure the kids were safe, and I knew they were going through a hard time in life, just one of them times where like they needed help, but I had to help myself first, I said before I could help others. And in that, I went through the first 21 days and it was either do I go home or do I go to phase 2? And like I said, there was really like the one day he's like, oh man, you'll see this whole house full. He said something will happen, a fight will break out. And he said, everyone will leave. And it was like 2 days later, everyone left. I'm like, I was like, where? I said, he wasn't lying. I said, this thing's real. It's like people are so far away from home. They're mentally stressed and everything. And, that's the one thing with, when you get into this, like as much as I wanted to help my kids, I had to take the time, and I talked to a lot of men on this, it's just, you have to, like they'll be like, oh, my kid's sports, I got to be there. I got to be here. I got to do this. I got to make this money. I got to get these things. It's like, you were broke when you came in. I mean, you were broken physically, mentally. So everything about you was broke. I said, I can tell you right now, you can go to your kid's game, but if you don't invest that time in yourself, I said, take it from somebody that's been there. I said, those 50 days that I took in rehab, I said, completely shifted like my entire life. And I said, in doing that, I said, it's kind of selfish in a sense, but I said, you have to get yourself right before you can be there for your kids. Because I said, if you start it, but then you occupy yourself going to your kids' games, I said, you can actually be present in your kids' life, but not actually be present. I said, you're there, but you're not there. You're not physically, you're there, but you're not there mentally. Because I said, you're worried about bills. You're worried about this. You're worried about all these different things, And I said, that was just being there. I got lucky. It was during COVID. So like they had the stimulus checks coming out. And I just told myself, I'm still weak. I haven't done the step work. And I'm going to come home to a $1,400 check and all my bills are paid.
Yeah.
So that's probably not a good place for me. So I said, I'll just take the money, pay my rent. And I said, stay another, however many days. So that was when like they shifted me from the stage 1 to the stage 2, which was more laid back. You had stage 1, they had like the in-house nursing 24 hours a day, where they had, it was more like everyone was like looked after at a higher level. And then like, I can't remember the names of it. It's like IOP and something else.
Yeah, you were talking about getting meds. I think everybody get the meds from.
Yeah. So that was like once you got to the stage 2, we more had a free aspect where like we had classes every day where you had a lot more like tackling the things that had happened in like my life. But then the aspect of like coming home, like your meds, there was somebody in the garage, but they didn't really look over the house, like they might come in and do a class at night. And typically they did that, like you would have classes during the day and then we'd have a speaker over at night. And it's kind of like the speaking stuff is like what I'm doing now, like where I would like go out, it's just part of recovery is giving back.
Yep. Sharing your story, inspiring other people, giving them hope, right?
Yep.
That's probably the best speakers you had were the one that give you all hope. I mean, that's what you need while you're in there, right? That's what people need. Anybody who's struggling with, doesn't matter what they're struggling with, you need hope.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's kind of, I was like, the book itself, it was like I did the 50 days, I came home, and that was like kind of like the next part of the journey. I told myself, like, I'm going to call this the California Chronicles. So like, that was like, I was just going to come home, write that, and it was going to be its own little thing, and like I said, I came home, I ended up getting fired from the job, and I'm like, uh-oh, now what am I going to do, and I ended up getting back into construction, like, I don't know, about 3 months later, and everything was good. Like, we had just had that big derecho storm. It came through the Midwest and just knocked out everything. So, like,
yeah,
there's people that, I mean, there was more damage done, like, in the Iowa territory. So, like, I called my old boss up or whatever, said, hey, you got any work? He's like, oh, man, I got more work than you can shake a stick at. So next thing you know, I'm working, 12, 14-hour days, and he was right by my side and made a bunch of money, paid my parents back, paid off everybody, and that was, I tell people in sobriety, now I said, stay broke your first year. I said, there's nothing worse than having a pocket full of cash and a bad foundation. Because I said, when something in your life happens, I said, and you have that pile of money sitting there, I said, you have access to it, and that's not good. So I said, take that money I said, pay your parents back, pay this, give it to good causes, do whatever. Well, I don't want to give all my money away. I said, money is just bad though. I said, you don't want it. I said, because I said, when life goes wrong, I said, you want to go to God. You don't want to go to your bank account. Because I said, that bank account's going to lead you down some bad paths. And once I got back into construction, I think it was like 4 months in, I was working for another contractor. And like when I got fired, it was kind of crazy. They contested my unemployment and they said they weren't going to. And I know I took it as a personal hit just because I was always making their job harder. But when they did that, I ended up going from June or July to December 7th without no pay. So like I had no income coming in. I was doing whatever. So at the time, that's what I said. I was kind of like working for cash, just trying to figure out how I was going to make ends meet, trying to keep, roof over my head.
But you still didn't go back to drink. You didn't go back to alcohol. You stood fast. Yeah,
I stayed. I said I was going to church, AA. I was going, it's all the different things that like I had in my life. I just kept on surrendering my own self. When things would get hard, I'd call my sponsor. That's why I said like, I'll take crying in my pastor's kitchen table over going back to drinking any day. I said, it's just those things, it's like drinking never solved any of those problems, and 4 months in, I was climbing up the side of a building and ended up falling. I think it was like right around 25 feet. I was going up and there's like an eave board. It kind of like has like a pitch where the roof comes over across it. I grabbed it and there's like a saddle. So like your truss comes down and like sits in the saddle like that.
Yep.
Well, when they shot, it was like in between. It was a 4-ply post. So when they shot in between the plies. So I actually sat on that board earlier in the day. And then they asked me to go do something. I said, sure. So instead of going around the building, I just go up the building and get on the roof. Well, I got to the top and I had one guy following me. And the guy's like, don't follow, get over here. And it's probably good because he would have changed the trajectory. He probably would have reached for me or something as I fell. But they're like, what happened to Jeff? It's just like when I grabbed the board, it just released. And I remember I said some choice words in my head, but I never actually said them out loud. I just knew that I was in a bad spot. Well, then when I like fell back, the one guy said he heard a thud. Well, they walked over and I was laying on the ground.
And it was you. You were the thud.
Yeah, I was the sack of potatoes that hit the ground. But I just remember they did wake me up. I remember talking to my son like before they put me in the helicopter, but I ended up this arm. So you probably can't really see it in the actual video, but like I have like a big scar right here where like the bone broke through the arm. Then I had this bone fell off on the side here. I had broken ribs, brain bleed, concussion, and then I had a hammer holder, kind of like had like a point like that. And it was right on my hip, and that drove through my femur, cracked the top of my femur.
Wow.
And I ended up in intensive care for 7 days. I remember I came to, I had my phone. I got like Snapchat out for some reason. I was looking around. I see my mom behind me. I'm like, what are you doing here? She's like, you about died. I said, oh. I said, I'm alive. I'm here. Here I am.
Wow. How high was that fall?
I said it was about 25 foot. It was a 19-foot ICH, which is like your interior clearance height on your building. And then it was on a 4-foot wall and the land sloped away. So when I fell off, I'm guessing it was probably about 25 feet.
Wow, man. I know that sounded like quite the impact you described to do all that kind of damage.
Yeah.
Messed your hip up too, right?
Yeah,
about breaking the bones.
Yeah, the femur, like where your femur like comes up into your hip socket, it cracked across the femur, and that was where they ended up putting like a 6-inch screw up through the femur. Like instead of just replacing it, they said with my age they were going to try that. They said a 1 in 4 chance it wouldn't take. And that's when you fast forward into the next part of the book where I had like the first 2.5 years in sobriety. It was kind of like all the things that happened to me. So it was like getting back, getting fired from my job, falling off a building.
Can't win. Stop drinking and still can't win.
Yeah, I was like, what the heck? My Humpty Dumpty story, put me back together. But
God was testing you out, see if you really didn't want to drink or not.
Yeah, and it was crazy because like when I fell off the building, being a recovering alcoholic, I didn't do pain meds. Like they were going to put me on high powered pain meds. I said, nah, I said, I said, I don't even want to go down that road again. I said, I would rather not, you know, and
Let me
so
suffer.
so I had like the Tylenol, I think it was like 500 milligrams or something. Like I'd take like 2 here and 2 there, which it didn't do nothing. I mean, it was just like, you know, that was where I ended up getting into art and playing my guitar again, just doing stuff because I had to like focus my mind. I mean, I remember waking up. They say like when you go through a trauma like that, your brain actually blanks the pain, because if you actually felt it at that time, that actually put you like into a shock and can kill you. So like I remember sitting in a recliner the one day and I could just like, I woke up, my head was spinning, and I was like, I said it was like the longest ride ever. I had one of them like electric chairs where it like stands you up. And I just remember like I had my wheelchair sitting next to me and it was just like, I'm like, come on. Trying to get myself up, rolled myself into the bathroom. And yeah, it wasn't a good time there. I called my mom at like 4 a.m. I said, I can't do this. I said, the pain's too much, and that was just one of those times I look back, it's like I ended up doing all that, with Tylenol, and it was, just a direct reliance on God to carry me through that time. And, it's just kind of a testimony in itself that, like the things that can happen in our life that, like I used to use alcohol for pain all the time, and it's like, it never fixed my back pain. It would numb it, so it was, in that moment, it was kind of a different, completely different take, because I was in way more pain than I had ever been. But it was definitely a very trying time. And then that was kind of where the construction business took off, because I came back getting out of the nursing home. I got put in a nursing home with a bunch of 90-year-old ladies. And I thought that was one of them times where you're like, all right, I don't know. Like I got sober and now I'm hanging out with 90-year-old ladies like this. I don't think this wasn't in my plans, Lord, and I kind of see like when I got back, because like when I got into construction, like I was going so fast that it slowed me down. But in that time, like there was some brokenness in my family and stuff. And like, I didn't think they were there for me. I'm like, I'm just out here by myself. No one cares. And then that time, like where they put me in the nursing home, like my whole family was there. So different times they came in, I kind of repaired those relationships, and, there was a silver lining behind it. Still wasn't, I don't, if you're not getting along with your family, I don't recommend jumping off buildings or anything, but I said it worked. It worked. It worked for my story. So, trying to think. I was like I said with the construction company, that was kind of like what I got back to work, kind of like doing a little bit here and there, and kind of like got back on my feet, which I wasn't in. I was in no shape how I was before prior to going. And
but you went back to where you were as an employee.
Yeah, I kind of went back as like a subcontractor or whatever. And the one guy I was working for, I remember the one day they had like a telehandler. Like, what a telehandler is, with the big forks on the front or whatever, with the boom out arm. I had the building hooked up to it and I had it straight. Well, then we went back and I was talking to my seller or whatever. I look back and they're yanking on the building. All of a sudden I hear pull, and the whole building just like went like this and went back. And there was 2 guys standing on the inside. I said, nah, I can't work for this guy. I said, I just about died once. I said, I ain't dying again. I said, no. I said, I can't do this. And my seller's like, I don't blame you. And he took off. I took off. I said, hey, man, is there any buildings I could just take off on my own? So I did one building. I literally started the company out of the back of my truck. I had, like 1 saw, 2 drills.
That's usually how it works, Jeffrey.
Yeah. I had everything packed in the back of my truck, and I did the one job, and then I took like $200 out of the profit, and I started my I used like that LegalZoom and started the LLC, and I didn't know what I was doing. The next thing you know, I had a company, and I was just like, I just heard something start a company, and it was kind of like, I wasn't much for reading. I was kind of weird with the leadership books. Like I wasn't much for reading. And then it was like, I read all these leadership books, but I was like, that's not really like who I am. So I said, I don't know. I don't like to read. Next thing you know, I'm writing a book, and I'm like, what's the chance that the guy that don't even like to read is writing a book, And it was, it was just like, it's like God's given me those things. Like, it's not my book, it's his book, it's his story through me, and like with the company, I mean, there's many days with the company where I've sat there and I'm like, why am I building pole barns? Why am I up here right now? And I had struggles like first year where, I had younger guys and just guys that were struggling with addiction, bringing them in, they'd come and go or whatever. And it just got to a point where it was just like, there was days I'd be there by myself. We were building a barn dominium and I was there for a month by myself, like doing everything I could on my own, and it was just like, why am I here? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I might just jump off the building today. I said, you don't have to, you don't have to worry about me falling off this one. I just might jump, and I said, that was kind of one of the humbling things, is like all those leadership books I read, it kind of like made me reflect back on how I was as an employee at the end. So, I mean, it was kind of one of them crazy parts where I look back, I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't want a guy like that working for me, So it did slow me down and realize, and like I've reached out to a lot of the supervisors and stuff. And that was the one supervisor that I ended up having. I ended up getting to sit down with him and kind of disciple him. He was going through a rough time and he kind of seen my life. He's like, man, how'd you do it? It's just
man.
like, yeah, this guy that was like the nut job at work that no one knew if he was going to fly off the handle or not. And all of a sudden his life completely transformed. And it's like, that's what it says, like we become a new creation, and transforms us, transforms our mind and our thoughts, our actions, so it's the person they knew was a completely different person than who like sat in front of them that day.
Yeah, man, that's what I always tell people, folks, like you're describing yourself and me, the way I was, I always tell people I should have been fired. I got promoted 14 times in those 20 years in manufacturing, but I should have been fired 100 times because I was an idiot. My character was terrible, and I was angry, and I was mad all the time, and I was not a good employee. I mean, I worked hard. I was a great performing employee. I was not a good person, though. And folks like I say me, or the way you just described yourself, when we actually transform ourselves and do the work, and God's the one making it happen if you're a person of faith. And I think even if you ain't a person of faith, he's still the one making it happen if you're able to transform. But folks like us, and people like probably a lot worse than both us, folks who really go through some stuff and really transform, they become powerfully inspiring. I always tell leaders when we go into companies speaking that, there may be some folks out there who's struggling, who maybe are your worst employees, but if they were to latch onto this stuff, they're going to be the most inspirational employees in the company, because everybody knows who they already are, just like that guy knows who you were. That's why who you are now is so inspiring to him, especially the people that know you.
Oh, yeah.
That's good stuff. I talked to a guy today that may bring us in for the Alabama Department of Traffic. They got like 4,400 employees, and he graduated a year from me, and I was like, you remember me, man? He said, I kind of know, because I was like, I'm trying to figure out if I need to apologize or not. But that's who I've apologized to a lot of people. My ex-wife, my son's mother, once I figured out, I think I was still drinking when I apologized to her and her husband, but I had grown enough that I realized I'm a different person, even though I was still drinking. So, I discovered this leadership stuff 2008, and by 2012 is when I stopped drinking. But I grew a lot from 2008 to 2012 when I was still drinking. But I grew the most when I figured out in 2012 I got to really work on me, and that's when I quit drinking. It's when I become a person of faith and raised my hand, accepted Christ, and all that stuff. So we share a lot. That's what you said. I think when you reached out, I mean, I wasn't drinking 50 beers, but you might not have been as mad at the world as I was, wanting to kill everybody. So we all got a different story, right?
Yeah.
So that's powerful, man. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think I've seen, maybe it's in your book, I can't remember. It must have probably got to be in the book, but I've seen that logo. That's your logo for your company on your shirt, right?
Yeah,
what's the name of your company?
Rise Up Construction. And that was actually I spent a lot of my time, I was just kind of like isolated from the world, where I got into playing like first person shooter games on Xbox or whatever. And like, it was just one way that like I'd keep my mind busy, but I had guys that I met on there, and I would be talking, and like the one dude, he was actually the first one I told about going to rehab. His daughter got cancer at like 7 and ended up passing away. I was like, man, I don't get it. And he goes, hey, man, we all suffer. We all go through times, He's just like, he said, everyone's pain's different. He goes, I wouldn't want to go through any of the stuff you went through either. I said, yeah, you're right. And I think it's his brother-in-law is like this cool. I mean, he makes awesome videos and stuff. And like, he just does it part-time, but like, he's like a manager at like a tow truck service. And he's like, "Hey man, you got a logo for your company?" I said, "No, not that." I kind of, drew some stuff, but I said nothing really. And he ended up sending me this logo, and I was like, "That's actually pretty cool." It's got the house shape upside down with the house shape inside. It's like, that's why I said, like, it was just kind of crazy how the logo came about. And yeah, it's just, I guess it stuck.
Yeah, and what's that website where people can get your information? Pop it up there.
Yeah, beyondbrokenministries.com.
Yeah, for the folks listening, beyondbrokenministries.com. And what type of stuff's that website?
It's actually just kind of like in the infant stages of the website. I started the book ministry here this last year. Like I said, I ended up getting married January 1st of last year, which God blessed me with a woman that she was actually at the church that I went to. So I got into church, was playing in the praise band, and then, got back into playing guitar. And then she sat behind me for like a year, and I was like,
she was stalking you, man.
Yeah, I would get off stage. I'd never say hi to her or anything, and just like, it was just kind of like wave or whatever. And her dad ended up passing away. And that was one of the things in the book. My dad got cancer, like in the first 2 years of my sobriety or whatever, and ended up passing away. So it was like, I had those struggles on top of falling off a building, trying to start a business, all this different stuff. Dad has stage 4 cancer, and like going through that, and
yeah, that's tough. What's her name?
What's that?
What's her name? Your wife's name?
Allie.
Yeah, God put you up there where Allie could see you. She might, I don't think she was stalking you, but God set you up there where she could see you.
Yeah.
Here he is. Here he is. There he is.
Yeah. And that's why I said, just kind of been like, integrating into that and, becoming a mixed family with my kid, her kids, and just, starting like the business is kind of taking off now with the construction side of things. And then I had the book, I became a published author. I'm like, oh man, it's like, now what do I do? I'm an author, and it's just one of those deals that I started Beyond Broken Ministries LLC. So my associate pastor at the church here that I'm actually at right now, he does a lot of tech stuff. So like, he ended up starting a web page for me. So the web page is actually, we got like a little mini video. If you go to that, there's like a little mini like teaser video.
Okay.
And this kind of gives a breakdown of what I was going through. And I can't say it's the best. I'm the best actor, It's kind of like my tech savvy, but I was like, one day maybe we'll get her fixed up. But yeah, just kind of the website has about like the book, and then it also has a link to the web page that we started for the Rise Up Construction that shows different projects that we've done. And then what I'm kind of getting into now, it's kind of crazy doing this podcast, but then also in the fact of like, he's like, hey man, we got to get you some speaker engagements and stuff like that, because one of the things I thought and like seeing was like doing speaking engagements and going and like sharing my story of hope. And I had done some with like the AA, like where you do like they call it like speaker nights or whatever, where you go and like, I'll share my testimony at different places. And he had mentioned about trying to find one. And I was like, the podcast came up. My mom asked me to speak at their church. And then the very next day I'm speaking at this New Horizons addiction center, sharing my story there. So it's just kind of crazy. Like 3, like back to back just hit up, and I'm just like, all right, we're doing something, So it's crazy once it does take off, like I still haven't got to that. I don't know if you struggle with that. If you go in front of companies and stuff, like I can like meet a guy off the street and tell him my whole life story, but you put a microphone in my hand and like set me in front of 50 people and I instantly freeze. I'm like, it's like,
you just got to look out there and find the one that's listening to you and talk to them.
Yeah.
You can tell the ones who are interested, when you start telling your story. So if that's an issue, I ain't really had an issue, and I don't say that with pride and ego, but the only reason is because I know what I'm talking about. If I'm talking something like you're telling your story, that story. So it's not like, it ain't like I'm bringing you in there, giving you a mic, say, tell them how to, work on a computer.
Yeah.
Because you don't know that, but you know the story, just like you're sharing right here. That's what I always tell people. And it's what I do. And once I realized I could do this, that's when I decided I can be a speaker. And it's real simple. Once I figured out I can just be myself, I'm good to go because I'm already that. And that's my advice to you or anybody else. I always tell people, be authentic. If you're taking any kind of speaker training and they try to tell you all this stuff that's really uncomfortable for you, that's probably not for you. Because that's what a lot of speaker training I went through. That's what they start trying to get me like out of my comfort zone, not in a way of growing and learning about speaking, but trying to become someone else. I'll give you an example. Whenever I speak, one of the first things I tell people is I'm bilingual. I say it right off the bat. I'm bilingual. And I say, you probably, we speak all over the country. So a lot of people think I speak English and Spanish, but that's not it. It's English and country. Just like you, they laugh just like that. Right. And when I was going through the speaker training, I had that way back then. And I said it in my, when I was going through with the speaker coach, the mentor, and he told me that I didn't need to say that. It wasn't going to work, but I didn't listen to him. I've been saying it it don't matter when I speak at Yale University, I said it. When I speak at a concrete company, I say it. If I'm speaking to 3,000 people, I say it. If I'm speaking to one person, sometimes I say it. It just depends.
Yeah.
Because real people want authentic people.
Mm-hmm.
So the tips, though, is figuring out, like you said early on, you got to have a 15-minute story. You got to have a 30-minute story. You maybe got to have an hour story.
Yeah.
And not a script. Some speaker training, they want to teach you to script it out and then memorize it. I ain't that guy. I can't remember nothing. If me and you go to McDonald's drive-through, I can't remember what you want. You're going to have to tell them. I mean, that's the way it is. You say number one, I got you. You say number one, add this, take that off, all that stuff. We going in probably because you're going to have to tell them. But that's just the way it is. But, just a couple of tips for you there. Just be authentic, be yourself, have confidence. There's no reason not to have confidence because of what you went through and what you've come through. And remember, you're not teaching them anything. So you ain't got to be a PhD or nothing. That's stuff I used to think too about people write books. Oh, you got to be some PhD or a professor or somebody. What qualifies you to write a book? You got to write a book. That's all you got to do to be qualified to write a book. Yeah. But the way you've told your story here, you got a great way to tell your story. And touch on one of the most powerful things you said to me was, and these are the kind of things you need to put in your story when you're speaking, because these kind of things that people feel is when you said about that supervisor, the one that knew who you used to be. And now he sees you as an inspiration to him. Those are the stories. Like when I speak, I talk about, depending on who I'm talking to, I have rough a story. I tell you, I got some rough stories. So when I'm talking to them hardcore blue collar guys, the ones that sometimes the leaders call those crusty guys with the hard shell on that can't nobody get through. When I talk to them, I have to tell them a tough story, where they know I was really an idiot. I ain't talking about being an idiot. They start telling them a story about my story. Yeah. Like, oh, this guy really was crazy. So then, I build a little rapport that they know, what I'm talking about. I talk about outrunning the law and really wanting to kill folks in times that I didn't, but I wanted to, the stuff. But it's tons and tons of stories. But the one thing that I'll give you a tip that I did get, and other people might, be listening, is the reason reading is good is it helps you turn a lot of the stuff that you talk about, that becomes a story. And then when you read, like, it could be verses from the Bible, or it could be, like quotes out of my book, something I said or somebody else said, or some other books you're reading. But John Maxwell told me, a long time ago, I heard him say, never make a point without sharing a story, and never share a story without making a point. Because you want, the point is like the principle. The point is the principle. Like the law of sacrifice, you got to give up to go up. That's like a principle. That's what you did. You gave up a lot, but you've been going up. And then if you want to stay there, you got to give up some more just to keep it. Like going to the gym, you don't get to go get in shape and then quit going to the gym. You got to keep giving up.
They say walk out your deliverance. Yeah.
Yep. If you want to go higher, you got to give up some more. And then if you want to help somebody else get fit, now you got to give up your time for somebody else to benefit. Yeah. So that's like, the law of sacrifice. But the law of sacrifice, you got to give up to go up. That don't mean a whole lot without the story. See, I just told you a couple of little stories. Yeah. But right now, you could speak for an hour easily, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Yeah. If you can articulate and say, hey, John Maxwell says the law of sacrifice, you got to give up to go up. Let me tell you what that means. You could get on stage right now, Jeffrey, without ever even knowing you were about to do that, and take that principle and start telling stories and wrapping them around it. So that's why I encourage you to continue to read personal growth, leadership development books, because it's going to allow you to grab these nuggets. Like I told you earlier with Les Brown, coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. I never wrote that down and studied it. All the stuff you hear me say, I never wrote it down and studied it. I just read so much that those little things that God needs me to have, he just sticks it on there. I just read a lot. I've been reading every day for 18 years. And people say, how you know so much? I'm like, I don't know that much. Most stuff I read, I don't remember none of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got wound up, trying to share some stuff with you there, but
you're good.
That's all you got to do, man, is just number one thing, be authentic. You already got a heart to serve and a heart to help. Walk out there and do that. And what you say and how you say it matters, but don't really change who you are. The more you read, though, the personal growth and leadership stuff, the better you're going to be with your story. Because see, I could take your story and tell it, even though it ain't my story. I would say it's your story, but I would tell it by teaching a lot of principles that I know related to all kinds of stuff. But that's what'll separate you from the crowd. And because now you can teach them some stuff, tell them some stories so they can figure out. Because see, what happens is when I tell you a story, you tell yourself a story.
Yeah.
That's a story you need to hear. So when you walk into a room and you start telling a story, if there's 100 people there, they start telling themselves 100 stories. And it's the story they need to hear. I don't know that story, but they know it. So you teach a point, tell a story. Sometimes teach a point, tell 3 or 4 stories, because you may see that this guy on the front row, he just got it. You told him, you taught the point, you shared a story, and he locked in on it. You could just tell he was with you. But some people you could tell they wasn't quite with you. So let me tell you a different story that relates to the same thing. Now you tell a different story. The first guy, he just gets reinforced again, but it's a new story, so he ain't hearing the same thing over. But now you're telling a different story in a different way about the same thing. And now some other people are going to, come in, be pulled into that story. So it just depends. Sometimes one story will lock everybody in. Sometimes you need a couple of stories. But that's the key point. And, you can call me anytime, Jeffrey, when you want to talk about speaking. I can help you. There's a lot of things I can give you, little tips that really help you, if you got 15 minutes or you got 30 minutes or you got an hour, figure out your key points and stuff like that. And you probably have another book at some point you'll be able to write. And
I think I got the basis of the second one. I started writing it already. So it's like somebody already asked me, like, when's the second one come out? I said, I didn't even want to write the first one.
So look, Jeffrey, this is for you and anybody that's listening, but I don't know if you even know I got a podcast, but I got like 500 something episodes. But episode 351, I share about a 30-minute podcast on how I actually write my books. Like the books you're talking about that you've read.
Yeah.
I write those books in 7 days, start to finish. All my books, 7 days. If I want to write a book today, I ain't even got to have a name, but 7 days from now, I'll be ordering the proof on Amazon. And I teach you how to do that. And you saw how the books are. They're 30 chapters, three pages each. But, for somebody like you, you can write that same format. And I teach you that in that episode 351, how to do it. And it's so easy for somebody like you that's got an amazing story, a powerfully inspiring story. It's so easy to do that. And then that book can actually become a platform. I write them that way. Rhea and I write our books that way because people can use them for book studies, because you can read a chapter in 6 or 7 minutes. And we got a free book study training that people can listen to and then go, do it that way. But there's a lot of value in those little books. People like me and you that don't like to read, write a simple little book, 30 chapters, 3 pages per chapter. People love to read that book. You saw it, you read it. You just turn a few pages and you threw a chapter. People just love it. So there's a method to the madness of why I do that. But as long as I'm alive, man, all you got to do is call me. I'll mentor you and speak with you and help you and whatever kind of way I can do it like that. That's what I do. That's all I do. That's why I put my phone number up everywhere.
Well, it was kind of crazy. Sometimes I think like the audience, that's where you're talking on, that just kind of resonated with me. Like when I go and I do like AA meetings at like the Scott County Jail here in like my hometown or whatever. And like when I go on there, it's just a spot where I'm like passionate. I'm in there, I'm talking to broken men. So that's very easy for me to open up and tell my story. But like you put me in front of a church and all of a sudden I'm like, ugh. And when I first wrote the book, it's actually I still got the original where like there was a lot of profanity in the book because when I wrote the book, it was my authentic blue collar self. That guy you were talking about that's crusty on the edges.
Yep.
When you grow up in that, your jargon's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, I was that
you're
guy.
not
I
saying,
know.
"Hey, how are you doing today?" It's, you're throwing out cuss words left and right, and it's just this. Like I said, it's not like you're working in a doctor's office. I said you're working in these blue collar fields where I said you got broken men and night shifts, and like there's bad marriages and can't see your kids, all these different things. I said, this is a spiritually bad place to be in the beginning, So I said, like, to step into those realms, and it's just, I don't know. Like, my book applies to that, like it's to me, as I'm not going for the guy who sits in the front row at church that's already gave his life to Christ. I said, this is coming from a guy that was beyond broken. And this is how I became beyond broken. I said, that's where it's like a double take on the book. Cause I said, I was beyond broken. I was to the point where I didn't want to live anymore. The decisions I had made, anxiety, depression, all that stuff that just like weighed on my life. Like, I just didn't know how to get rid of it. But then, like I said, like in surrendering my life to Christ and just really digging in and changing those things about me, and just whenever I had those issues, that I became beyond broken. There's a different version of me, God had something better for my story. So it's like when I go in, I mean, that's where I said, like, I wrote a book. There's a guy that does this Iron Sharpens Iron conference here in the Quad Cities. And it's coming up here in March. And like the very first time I walked in, big stage, I was just like, I'm going to be up there one day. I told myself that. And then the next thing I got a published book. I found out that it was kind of crazy, but our associate pastor was married to his daughter. I didn't know none of this stuff. I was just like, what's the chances of that? But it's just like how like different pieces of the puzzle seem like they come together. And I'm like, what the heck? And I remember when I walked out of that room where I seen that stage, and the pastor, when I accepted Christ that day, I hadn't seen him in probably 15 years. He was standing there like this, just leaning up outside, just standing by himself. When I walked out this door, it's one of them coincidences. I said, why is he standing here? It's out of all places, and it was just like, he's just standing right here waiting for me. He's like, hey, how you been? I'm like, doing better now. I said, kind of had a crazy journey, but I said, where I'm at now. And I got sat down, like sit down with him and like just explain my life, about accepting Christ and going prodigal and coming back. And
I figured it out.
Yeah. And it's just, like I said, like, it's one of them deals. Like, I got my books into the Scott County jail. And then there's another guy, he's a metal supplier. He goes around telling his story too. He's a recovered addict. And he's got my book in the other jails, but it's like, that was one of those things. I said, if God takes me in that direction, that I am going into jails, I am going in those places where the broken men are, and it's like, I'm not having to go in and try to tell my story to people that are, like, who's this blue collar guy, that's a little rough around the edges. I said, there's a part of me that's always going to be me, it's just, even though I've changed.
You got to stay that guy. When you talk about the broken people in prison, everybody knows they're broken. But those folks, the white collar folks or the folks in the conference or whatever, they broken too. Just everybody don't know it. We all got some stuff. Some of us are beyond the stuff, beyond broken. I am, you are, Rhea is, but the majority of people are still broken. No matter what no matter what they look like on the outside, most people are struggling. I always say, I see miserable people all over the place. I see them every day, everywhere, miserable people, but they don't even know it. They don't even know they're miserable, but they think that's just the way life is. That's just the way their life is. Like when you were broken, you kind of think that's just the way life is.
It's easy to become a prisoner too, because that's like when I was working in a factory, it's a job I didn't want to be in. I was trying to make good of it there, but it's like you meet other people that's like the old people in the unions or whatever. They're trying to like hold their jobs where the young guys aren't coming in and they're booting them out or whatever. But then you got management when you got like, it's, I never looked at it from management's perspective. I was giving them, well, this is what the guys on the floor need, but then they got someone at a corporate level talking to them. So like in the mix of it until you really, see all the different angles. But it's like one of the guys that worked with me at the factory, I don't remember if I have it in the book or not. I think I might. But he was my union steward at the time. I don't know if that was in the book where he's like, hey, man, you're going to be all right. Just stay doing, things are going to work out. I'm like, all right. Well, he ended up coming back like a year later, like 2 years later, and my life had transformed. That's where they said we're supposed to become the salt and season other people's lives. He goes, I don't know. He's like, dude, you've fallen off a building, got fired from jobs. Your dad's got cancer. He's like, you're out here smiling. I said, yeah. I was like, things are different when you got Jesus, I guess. It's just like, I don't know. It's just like, I said, I've been to a spot where I said, I used to eat dinner with the devil. I said, I don't do that no more. But I said, I've been there, So I said, I see life in a whole different perspective. And he goes, well, how'd you do it? I said, why don't you come to church, man? And next thing you know, he came into church. He had this kind of like dead look to him, and just sat there. You could kind of tell like he didn't want to be there or whatever. Well, I said, just keep coming back, man. I said, do it for like a month and see what happens. Next thing you know, he ended up going up to the front and surrendered one day. I told him I'd be right behind him. I was right behind him, hand on his back. And so I'm here for you, man. And next thing you know, his life started taking off. I said, wait till you get in that water one day. He's like, oh, I was baptized as a kid. I said, well, it's different when you do it as an adult. He ended up getting baptized. And I just remember like being there and like, I didn't know he was getting baptized. I walked into one day. He's like, hey, I'm getting baptized today. I'm like, that was like, I can say like one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life is like, I guess it's what God's done through my life is in me transforming my life and being that light to others, that this guy came in, gave his life to Christ. And now I get to see that journey. And that was one of the recent things I started, like on Facebook. I've got like Beyond Broken Ministries LLC, but I started a discipleship group like out of my shop called the Shop Talk, where it's kind of like a blue collar discipleship, like I said, like it's in that, where I said, I just want it to be raw, gritty. I said, place where guys can come in. I said, it's not that church aspect where like, you feel like, oh, I got to be the best dressed. I said, man, it's a shop. I said, we might do things where, I said, I've never been good at tearing apart cars, but I can tear down a guy and rebuild him. I said, I can help him do that. So I said, it's a different like a different aspect of the shop for me, and
good stuff, man.
Yeah. Just redid a room. And like I said, we just had a second class last night on pride. I said, that was one of the big things. I said, if we could knock down, that pride level, I said, it allows us to start sharing our problems and, our issues. But I got some speakers lined up for different topics. And I got, I said, anywhere from probably like 10 to 20 guys now that have shown interest that just come over. I'm doing it one day each week. I like first and third Tuesday and then the second and fourth Thursday. But guys are just coming over, and I learned something too, like in the leadership aspect of leading from behind. So instead of be that one, which it was hard in my like starting construction, I always wanted to be hands-on. I had to be this. And when things are going wrong, it's very easy because you want to be in there because you're trying to stay efficient. You got to keep it's like, if I'm not here, this place will fall apart. Well, what you realize is you become a slave to it because you can't get away from it. So I have to let people make mistakes. I have to let them do that. So in this discipleship class, I actually started it where I've never been discipled before. Something just told me to start this discipleship group. I'm going to get discipled while everyone's getting discipled, and it was kind of that aspect of there's guys that have knowledge, the guys that are hungry to teach, there's guys that have that aspect. I said, putting them and allowing them to do those things, like just creating an atmosphere where people can thrive, but then where we all learn off each other. And I've learned that in work too. When I pull myself back and I let them make the decisions on their own, I've pretty much seen every mistake you can make building a pole barn. So it's just kind of one of those things that like, all right, hey, we'll work through it. It's going to cost a little bit, but it's like in doing that, like I just took that. It was like the first vacation I've ever been on was my honeymoon. So like since starting the company 4 years later, took my first vacation, where I was gone 10 days, came back, everything was running, it's,
That's
it was
awesome.
a good feeling to have that time to myself and, just kind of sit back and kind of reap the rewards of the 4 years that I've put all that hard work in.
That's good stuff, man. You got quite the story, and it's really been a privilege having you on, Jeffrey. I think me and you could talk all day, especially if we start going back and forth. And you were talking about that the cussing and profanity. I used to be that guy. It's one of the things I say about being authentic. Share your story. When I'm speaking, I don't talk. I hadn't used profanity since 2012 or alcohol, both or since 2018, I ain't drank regular sodas. I started drinking water. I'm getting older. I'm trying to stay healthy and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But when I'm talking about the profanity, I don't care what anybody else does. I just want to try to be a good role model for the people who following me. It's one of the things I said one day I can stop doing this and become a better person. But I tell people I used to be the guy, if I said a 1-word sentence, it had 2 words of profanity. There was no other way that I could talk, and I was in the Marine Corps, in the infantry, right out of high school, and working in blue collar jobs. That's how we talk. We drink a lot of alcohol, and we can use a lot of profanity. And we pros, the world I come from, everybody was a pro at both of those things for the most part. So I'm with you on that. But what I figured out is people don't care if I don't use profanity, as long as I don't care that they do. Most people don't even realize that I don't, because I don't care if they do. I just talk with them, and they don't usually doesn't even register that I'm not doing it. So that's a key piece, but we shouldn't be judging, right? I'm just there to help. So is there anything you didn't share, or I didn't ask you, that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I just touch base with like the gal I said, the gal I ended up marrying, it just ended up, she was sober and giving her life to Christ. And we both kind of had broken paths, when we came together, that God kind of brought that together. And like I said, having that person behind you, it kind of reminds me like knowing Rhea and like reading her book and knowing you and just, those things. It's just like, it's nice to have that in your life. You know what I mean? It's just,
we need some help.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I said kind of bouncing that back and forth off one another, like we did a 21-day fast the year before, and it was just like she had done it, but I mean, it was just a lot of, like having her by my side and, going through those things. And, it's just, I have a tendency, that's what I say, like in alcoholism, it's like a disease of perception, where like you can go back to the guy that you once were, and so it's like, there's times when, like business gets stressful or whatever happens, it's like, well, I remember the other day I just got a call where it was something with customer service, and that's one of my my red flag trigger points, that when I have to talk to somebody and I know the answer I want to get and they're going to take me somewhere else, and it's just like, I'm going to tear this person apart. And I look over at her, she's like, now be nice to him. It's like, dang it. It's like, all right. And it's just like, like I said, she ended up, came up and prayed for me today before even having this podcast, and just, like I said, just giving thanks to her for being by my side and allowing me to do these types of things. So
that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. And your website, once we get all this out, I'll talk to you after Rhea turns this off here in a minute and we start chatting for a few more minutes before we actually wrap it up. But you may want to put a link to this on your website. That way anybody goes, they can get an in-depth version of who you are and what you're talking about. That's one thing that you would benefit from. But you'll also have the link if you meet people or they want to hear your story, you'll be able to share this. It'll be a YouTube link that if they want to watch the video, or you'll have the link to the podcast if they want the audio kind of stuff. So hopefully you'll be able to leverage this and get your story out to more people. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It's a very powerful story. You got to keep doing it, man. And you're doing what you have to do. You just got to do it. People say, how you get where you at? I just don't stop. Right? Yeah. What's your slogan from your book?
Oh, no turning back.
Yeah. Just keep it. Don't turn back. You just got to keep moving forward. Well, all right, sir. We're going to wrap it up here today for the audience. And thank you again for being here. Proud of you. We always say keep climbing. And we always give our guests a book. So we'll send you a signed book. We'll talk to you about which one afterward. But you may like Rhea's new book, The Ladder of Influence, 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond. And might be something that really might help you and inspire you still in some other way, or maybe your family. How old are your children?
They're all different ages. My son's 21. My daughter's 19. She'll be 20. And then got 17 and 11 and 10. So
okay, so definitely those teenagers or over or beyond teenagers. This Ladder of Influence book, I'd highly recommend that you check it out. And again, if you want that one, we'll send it to you. Signed copy for you. But I always tell people, anybody with teenage children or in college age, it's a great book to do a book study with that age group. When I read that book from Rhea, I was like, every high school kid or college student, they ought to have to read this before they graduate, or they don't get to graduate. But she didn't write it for that purpose. But that's the audience that I see that really get a lot out of that book at a young age, because it talks about, influence. Starts with character, control of self, character development, competency development, contribution or commitment to developing others, and then contribution of service over time. All those are the 5 steps that she talks about in there. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up. And thank you again, man. Stay warm up there.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, man.
All right. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen, or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.